So, today we're going to talk about plagiarism. Picture this: midnight, the dorm. A long day is winding down. School, practice, the pressure of success. Homework still undone, sits in a bag, lurking, as you spy your bed, taunting in its softness. But, no matter how hard you try, you cannot focus. Dinner is a distant memory, your snack drawer is empty, but your roommate's stack of ramen beckons. You know it's not yours. Chances are she would never notice. Who would miss one tiny packet in such a mammoth stack? But it is not yours. So, what do? A, take the ramen. B, wait for your roommate to come back and ask to take the ramen. Or C, hunker down and finish your homework, snackless. If you answered A, you are a thief. B, you're a smart and pragmatic individual who covers his or her bases. And C, you're probably scared of your roommate. Now, picture this. Midnight, the dorm. A long day is winding down. School, practice, the pressure of success. Homework still undone, sits in a bag, lurking as you spy your bed, taunting in its softness. But no matter how hard you try, you cannot focus. You need one more paragraph for your analytical English essay, but you're plumb out of ideas. You spy your roommate's completed paper across the room. You know it's not yours. Chances are he/she would never notice. Who's going to notice one identical paragraph? You don't even have the same teacher. But it is not yours. So, do you A, take the paragraph, B, ask your roommate to brainstorm with you and then credit him or her in your works cited, or C, hunker down and finish your paper alone? If you, even for a moment, considered selecting option A, you should know that that would be plagiarism. Plagiarism is a form of theft, but instead of stealing something tangible, like your roommate's ramen, it involves stealing someone's words, work, or ideas. Plagiarism carries stiff penalties. At Montverde, it can mean up to 4 demerits for the first offense and 4 demerits or possible dismissal for the second offense. This information is found in the Montverde Academy Upper School Handbook on page 16. Moreover, it is wrong. It robs someone of their intellectual property and robs you of the opportunity to learn that doing your own works brings. So, in this tutorial, we're going to learn what plagiarism is, what our policy at Montverde on plagiarism is, and how to avoid plagiarism. So what is plagiarism? Plagiarism is presenting another person's ideas, information, expressions, or entire work as one's own. It is thus a kind of fraud, deceiving others to gain something of value. So what? Well, according to the experts on all things citation, the Modern Language Association, plagiarists are seen not only as dishonest, but also as incompetent and incapable of doing research and expressing original thoughts. Okay, plagiarism is bad. I get it. How can I avoid it? Well, first you need to talk to your teachers. Your teachers at Montverde are here to help you, and as a Montverde student, you also have access and use of the Writing Center. Make sure you follow all teacher instructions and specifications for how they would like you to cite. But remember, if you didn't write it, you need to cite it. Just a reminder about what citations are. Citations indicate where material you use comes from, and it also helps your reader find the resources you used. Couple helpful websites are the Purdue OWL website and plagiarism.org. So, what sorts of things should you include in a citation, do you think? A, the title of the work. B, the author or authors' names, page numbers where you found the material, the date your material was published, or E, all of the above. The correct answer is E. You should include the title of the work, the author's name, the page number where you found the material, and the date your material was published. How you cite this material, though, depends on the format your teacher chooses, so make sure you ask or read written instructions that are given to you. So, good reminder, if you didn't write it, cite it. This can happen whenever you use quotations, whenever you paraphrase, whenever you use an idea that someone else has already expressed, whenever you make specific reference to the work of another, or whenever someone else's work has been critical in developing your own ideas. There are many types of plagiarism. The 3 that we're going to discuss are direct plagiarism, mosaic plagiarism, and accidental plagiarism. Direct plagiarism. This can be when you have unattributed quotations, which means using someone else's words without citing them. So, To recap, if you have committed direct plagiarism if you have copy and pasted someone else's work. That can be something you found on the internet, a friend or enemy's homework or essay, into your own work and passed it off as your own. Also, if you use facts and statistics, you can't include a piece of information without citing the source. So here are some examples of direct plagiarism. The first comes from a teacher named Ryan Edwards from Queens College. So let's look at the student writer passage and the source passage. The student passage says, "Long ago, there was no written history. These islands were the home of millions of happy birds, the resort of 100 times more millions of fishes, sea lions, and other creatures." Okay, let's look at Duffield's passage. He says, "In which ages in which have no record, these islands were the homes of millions of happy birds, the resort of 100 times more millions of fishes, sea lions, and other creatures." Are you noticing any similarities? You should. This wording is exactly the same. This person has committed direct plagiarism. Let's look at a second example. It comes from the same source, but from the second sentence. The student turned in the paper that said, "Innumerable creatures predestined from the creation of the world to lay up a store of wealth for the British farmer and a store of quite another sort for an immaculate Republican government." Man, that sounds good. But the problem is, when we look at the source passage, we can see the exact same line. Innumerable creatures predestined from the creation of the world to lay up a store of wealth for the British farmer and a store of quite another sort for an immaculate Republican government. If you take direct quotations from another writer, you have to cite them, or this is considered plagiarism. The second kind that we have is mosaic plagiarism. Mosaic plagiarism occurs when a student borrows phrases from a source without using quotation marks, or finds synonyms for the author's language while keeping the same general structure and meaning of the original. Sometimes people call this patch writing. This kind of paraphrasing, whether intentional or not, is academically dishonest and punishable. So here's the deal. If you look at another person's work or copy and paste it into your document and change some words out for words that mean the same thing, also known as synonyms, you have plagiarized. So here's an example of mosaic plagiarism. The student writes, "Only 2 years later, all these friendly Sioux were suddenly plunged into new conditions, including starvation, martial law on all their reservations, and constant urging by their friends and relations to join in warfare against the treacherous government that had kept faith and neither friend or foe." So we look at the source passage, which is from Helen Hunt Jackson's A Century of Dishonor. She writes, "Contrast the condition into which all these friendly Indians are suddenly plunged now." So, friendly Sioux were suddenly plunged into new conditions, and the condition into which all these friendly Indians are suddenly plunged now. You should notice that these are the exact same idea, but worded differently. This is still plagiarism. Martial law now, in force on all their reservations, is nearly identical to martial law on all their reservations, and urging them to join in fighting this treacherous government that had kept faith with nobody, neither with friend nor foe, looks almost exactly like constant urging by their friends and relations to join in warfare against the treacherous government. Obviously, the student took Jackson's work, rewrote it, and passed it off on their own. That is plagiarism. So, you're saying if I write it in my own words, it isn't plagiarism, right? Well, nope, not necessarily. What you're talking about is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is okay, right? The idea of paraphrasing is to include the ideas or information from original source by rephrasing those ideas or information in your own words. The thing is, to have successful paraphrasing, you have to use as few words as possible from the original text. Be mindful not to change the meaning that you're trying to convey, and then cite your paraphrase. You don't have to know everything, but you have to be able to say what idea you learned in your own words and then credit the source from where you got the information. So without proper citation, your paraphrase could be construed or thought of as plagiarism, even if you don't mean it. So let's talk about paraphrasing a little bit more. Paraphrase demonstrates that you have understood the source material and can restate it in your own words. So, even if you're paraphrasing, you look something up in biology class, you learn about plants, that's great, write it down in your own words, but then make sure you cite where you got it from. This doesn't make you look bad, this makes you look like you're doing your research and the work your teacher has asked you to do. So when we look at the student passage here, According to A.J. Duffield, prior to the arrival of European explorers, these islands provided a rich habitat for countless birds and marine species. The natural resources of the region enriched British settlers and provided a foundation on which an independent, democratic government could prosper. So, hopefully, we see that there's a footnote here that cites Duffield's work, which means that even though the student has paraphrased Duffield's ideas, they have in fact cited them as Duffield's. This person has not committed plagiarism. Now we can take a look back at the source passage that the student used so you can get an idea of how to successfully paraphrase. Note that the student's work is in their own words and that they don't copy any phrases or just merely change words for synonyms in their paraphrase. So, we've talked about kinds of plagiarism. There is unintentional plagiarism. The problem with this is it doesn't matter if you mean to or not. Unintentional plagiarism, by definition, is committing plagiarism without meaning or intending to. If you take information or text from another source and you use it without attributing or crediting the author, it's always plagiarism, even if you don't realize you're doing this. I know that may sound unfair, but it's true. If you didn't write it, you need to cite it. So here's some suggestions to avoid plagiarism. 1. Keep track of where your information comes from during the research process. Especially if you're researching on your iPad, you have a lot of links to keep track of. Make sure you're keeping track of that. 2. Cite while you write. Don't save it for later. You might forget. So once you actually cite something in one of your papers, cite it right away. The third suggestion is to cite often. Even if you're unsure, it's always better to err on the side of oversighting. And your teacher will give you back some feedback about how you might be able to decide what you need to cite and what you don't. But if you're unsure, it's always better to cite. The last thing, and the one I think that is probably most important, is to pick sources that you are able to understand on your own or with help from a teacher. If you can't restate it or you don't understand it enough to be able to find the main idea on your own, don't use it. So, what's Montverd's policy on all this? Well, in the handbook, Montverd defines plagiarizing as academic theft that occurs when a person uses words, images, or ideas belonging to another person or source and then presents them as their own work. By virtue of turning something in and putting your name on it, you are presenting it as your own work. You're saying that everything that comes underneath your name is your own work. So, examples of plagiarism that Montverd can find you guilty of is if you use words, ideas, or images from a book, website, magazine, or other source without properly citing that source. Purchasing or downloading free papers from the internet. That's someone else's work. You can't buy it and then say it's your own because you didn't write it, so you can't do that. Also, you can't submit papers written by someone else as your own work. You can't take someone else's homework, someone else's essay, write your name on it, and turn it in. That is plagiarism. Also, you can't submit the same paper in more than one class without the teacher's permission. Just a reminder, demerits are issued for honor code violations. So let's help this bear, this woefully irresponsible bear, avoid plagiarism. Do you think the following statements are true or false? 1. If you use someone else's ideas, but put them in your own words, it's totally okay. 2. Quoting from a text is okay as long as you cite it. 3. If you pull language and ideas from many sources, it no longer counts as plagiarism. 4. If a classmate and I talk about the paper and come up with an idea together, I can totally borrow the text that she writes because it's both of our idea. Next, citing information, if I'm unsure, is always a wise precaution. I should never use material that came from somewhere else. It's just too risky. So let's take a look and see how you did. This first one is false. This is still plagiarism. In order to properly paraphrase, you have to summarize the main idea in your own words and then cite it. 3 is false because it's plagiarism. Even if you have a bunch of sources, you have to cite each of the sources, always. 4 is false too, because assuming your teacher has allowed you to collaborate, which is not true if it's an individual assignment, you would both need to be credited and then also write your own original papers. 6 is also false. I know this seems scary, but don't let the fear of plagiarizing stop you from doing research. Just cite what you find. Here's my works cited page, where I found the information that I used throughout the project. Here I've cited other people's work when the words weren't my own. Thank you for watching, and good luck on your quiz.